The first law of success is simple yet incredibly powerful. Show up. It sounds easy, doesn't it? Just show up. But if it's so simple, why do so many people fail to do it? Why do so many talented individuals let opportunities slip through their fingers because they hesitate, overthink, or wait for the perfect moment? The truth is, showing up is the foundation for every achievement you'll ever have. In fact, 90% of success is just about being there, physically, mentally, and emotionally. Without that, nothing else matters. Your talent, your preparation, your potential, they can't take you anywhere if you don't show up. And as a marching performer, this law applies to everything you do, from auditions to rehearsals to performances and beyond. Think about the performers who make it to world class ensembles. Do you think they were just naturally better than everyone else? Sure, talent matters, but the truth is, those who succeed are the ones who consistently show up. They show up for every audition, even if they feel underprepared. They show up to every practice, even when they're tired, they're sore. They show up for themselves, even when they're filled with self doubt. Showing up doesn't guarantee immediate success, but it guarantees that you're in the game. It gives you a chance to learn, to grow, to fail, and to try again. That's the difference between those who dream and those who achieve. Now, let's break this down. What does it actually mean to show up? Is it just about being physically present? No, it's more than that. Showing up means committing to action no matter how you feel. It's about doing the work when you're tired, you're nervous, or even when you're unsure of yourself. It's about taking that first step, even if you don't know what the second step looks like. Here's an example. Let's say there's a camp for your dream DCI corps coming up. You're nervous. You start telling yourself, oh, I'm not ready. What if I make a fool of myself? What if I get cut? But showing up means you go anyway. You walk into that audition room and you give it everything you've got, because even if you're not perfect, you're one step closer to your goal than if you had just stayed home. Next, I want to talk about fear. Fear is the number one reason people don't show up. Fear of failure, fear of embarrassment, fear of not being good enough. But let me ask you this. How will you ever know what you're capable of if you don't try? Imagine this. You're standing at the edge of a pool, wondering if you can swim. You can feel the coolness of the water. You dip your toe in a little bit. You kind of hesitate. You're thinking about how cold it might be or how embarrassing it would be to struggle. But here's the thing. You'll never actually know if you can swim until you jump in, right? The same goes for your journey as a performer, whether it's stepping into an audition room, tackling a difficult snare break, or even just performing under the lights at a show. You'll never conquer what you don't face head on. Jump in, you'll figure it out. Here's something incredible about showing up. The more you do it, the more motivated you become. When you show up, you make progress. When you make progress, you feel accomplished. And when you feel accomplished, you're inspired to show up again. It's a cycle that feeds itself. But the opposite is also true. If you don't show up, you stagnate. You start to feel unmotivated, like you're almost falling behind. And the longer you stay stuck, the harder it is to get moving again. That's why showing up isn't just important, it's essential for building momentum in your life. Showing up is so much more than just a mindset, it's a survival skill. Think about it. You're part of a team. Your actions don't just affect you, they affect everyone around you. And if you don't show up in rehearsal, you're not just letting yourself down, you're letting your entire line down. And let's be honest, right? No one feels like showing up 100% of the time. There will be days when you're tired, when, making that one dot feels impossible, when you doubt whether you're good enough to even be there. But those days matter the most, right? Because when you show up on your hardest days, you prove to yourself that you're stronger than your excuses. Let me share a secret with you. No one who's successful in this activity started out perfect. Not a single one, right? The performers you admire, the ones who make it look effortless, they all started somewhere, right? They all failed, got back up, and they kept going, right? I'm sure they messed up down the line during auditions. I'm sure they missed the instructions before a rep. They got cut from groups they dreamed of marching with, right? But what sets them apart is that they showed up again. Every failure was a lesson. Every setback was a stepping stone. And every time they showed up, they got closer to their goals. Next, let's talk about faith, not in a religious sense, but in the belief that if you show up, something good will come of it. It might not happen immediately, but every action you take plants a seed for the future, right? You show up to rehearsal, you'll get better. You show up to auditions, you'll gain experience. Faith is believing in the process even when the results aren't immediate. And the more you show up, the more that faith will grow. Again, it's a cycle. Showing up builds confidence, and confidence makes you want to show up even more. Remember, showing up isn't just a single action, it's a habit that compounds over time. Every time you show up, you stack small wins. Alone, each win might feel insignificant, but over weeks, months, and years, these small wins compound into massive success. For example, think about practicing your triplet rolls, right? Day one, it might feel like you're barely improving, but by day 30, the precision and the clarity in your playing will reflect every single time you showed up. This concept of showing up also teaches you discipline. Discipline isn't something you're born with, right? It's something you develop. And the only way to build discipline is by showing up, right? Even when it's inconvenient or uncomfortable. Discipline means sticking to your practice schedule when your friends are hanging out, or committing to a camp even when you're nervous. The more you show up, the more discipline you develop, and that discipline becomes the foundation for success in every single area of your life. One of the biggest reasons people don't show up is fear of the unknown. But here's the thing, you can't predict how something will go until you actually show up. Maybe you're nervous about a tough audition piece. Maybe you're worried about how you'll be perceived at a camp, right? But how many times have you shown up to something and realized, oh, this actually wasn't as bad as I thought? The reality is you're stronger and more capable than you give yourself credit for. But again, you only discover that when you show up. I've talked a lot about what happens when you show up, but let's flip the script for a second. What happens if you don't show up? Well, you miss opportunities to grow. You miss chances to connect with others. Worst of all, you reinforce a habit of hesitation and regret. The cost of not showing up is far greater than the discomfort of facing your fears. So ask yourself, what's the cost of staying in today? What's the cost of skipping that rehearsal, that audition, or the practice time you set for yourself? Showing up requires courage, right? Especially when you're stepping into an unfamiliar territory. Courage, it's not about being scared. It's about taking action despite your fear. Remember this, every time you show up in the face of fear, you're building a muscle. The quote unquote courage muscle gets stronger every time you step into that audition room, every time you perform under pressure, and every time you tackle something that scares you. When you show up, you're not just affecting your own life. You also can inspire others. Think about it. When someone in your line pushes through exhaustion and tiredness, everyone around them feels that energy. Your commitment to showing up sends a message to your peers, your instructors, and even future performers that success only comes from consistent action. When you show up, you end up creating a ripple effect of motivation and excellence, and I promise you, it spreads to all the people around you. I know I also talked about failure a little bit earlier, but let's reframe failure for a moment. What if I said showing up guarantees that you'll fail? Yeah, it guarantees it. But here's the secret. Failure isn't the end. It's actually the beginning. Every crushed diddle, every rejected audition, and every dirty show run is a chance to learn. Failure is proof that you're in the game, taking action, and that you're growing. And the only way to avoid failure is to do nothing. And what does doing nothing guarantee? It guarantees that you'll never succeed. Remember that showing up also helps build identity. Every time you show up, you're reinforcing a powerful identity, right? You consistently show up, you consistently see yourself as someone who takes action, someone who follows through, who, is reliable and resilient. This identity becomes part of who you are, and it helps drive you to keep pushing forward. We also have to understand that in the marching arts, it's such a team game, right? And trust is everything, right? Your instructors need to trust that you'll deliver. The people you're marching with need to trust that you'll hold your own. And most importantly, you need to trust yourself to rise to the challenge, right? That trust starts with showing up. Every time you show up for a rehearsal, every time you give your all during a performance, you're building trust with yourself and the people around you. Here's a practical tip. Focus on taking the first step, right? If you're super overwhelmed by a long practice session, just start with the first exercise. If you're nervous about auditioning, just fill out the registration form. If you're dreading a tough rehearsal, just put on your shoes and start walking out the door, right? Once you take that first step, the rest will follow, right? Showing up is about momentum, and momentum always starts with one small action. Preparation is also a very important, precursor to taking action, but it can also be a trap, right? Many people over prepare as an excuse to avoid taking any action. They think, oh, I'll just show up when I'm ready, right? But the truth is, you'll never feel 100% ready. Sometimes the best preparation is just showing up, right? You'll learn more in one real world experience than you ever could in hours of just planning and saying you're going to do something. And finally, I want you to remember to celebrate the fact that you're showing up, right? Did you make it to rehearsal even though you were tired? Celebrate that, right? Did you audition even though you were scared? Celebrate that. Did you pick up your sticks and sit down at your pad and practice for just 20, 30 minutes? Celebrate that, right? Every time you show up, you're making progress, right? Recognize and honor those wins because they're the stepping stones to your ultimate success, right? If you get 0.2% better every single day and you multiply that over the course of a month, over the course of a year, right? Imagine how much you're actually going to get better and how much progress you're actually going to make just by taking one small first step and congratulating yourself when you actually show up. So, all in all, success in the marching arts and in life in general starts with one simple decision: to show up. It doesn't matter if you're scared, tired, or unsure of yourself, just take that first step, right? Because every time you show up, you're building momentum, you're creating opportunities, and proving to yourself that you're capable of much more than you ever imagined. So, here's my challenge to you. Make a list of all the areas in your life where you need to show up. Is it an audition you've been avoiding? Is it a practice routine you've been putting off? A conversation with a member or an instructor that you've been too nervous to start? Write it down, then take action. Show up. Even if it's messy, even if you're not fully ready, even if you're scared, just take that first step because once you're there, you'll figure it out. You always have, you always will.